Hey guys, it's Miss Checka. I am very near the Mexican border in a little town called Crystal City, Texas. And I took a little field trip here to learn something more about a very tricky part of Texas and American history, which I actually didn't know very much about, and that is World War II internment camps. So even though I have lived in Texas for most of my life, I didn't know that this was something that had happened here. So during World War II, the U.S. obviously fought on the Allied side of the war, and on the other side were the Axis powers, so Germany, Italy, Japan, and after Pearl Harbor, there was a lot of hysteria in the U.S. about like, hey, we have all of these Japanese American immigrants and German American immigrants and Italian American immigrants, and hey, maybe they're not real loyal Americans, and maybe they might even side with the Axis powers if things came right down to it. So the U.S. government decided to put people into internment camps. Some people say concentration camps. Actually, I was very interested to see that historical marker right there, which is from the Texas Historical Commission, uses the word internment camp, and that marker right there, which is put up by the children and grandchildren of people who were in the camps, uses the word concentration camps. So that lets you know that even today we don't quite know how to talk about this thing that happened, this thing that we did, and the people who were on the receiving end of being in these camps have maybe a different idea about it than the people who are kind of in charge of writing the history. But the upshot is that this camp in Crystal City, Texas, was the only internment camp during World War II that was specifically built for families. So they had people of the ethnic origins of all of the Axis powers, some of whom were in the U.S. and were American citizens. Some of them were actually immigrants who had come from countries like Italy or Germany to Latin American countries, and they got deported from places like, there were some Italians, I think, in Peru, and Germans. There was also a small group of Indonesian sailors that ended up here, but basically most of the people here were Japanese Americans, and there were thousands and thousands of people here, and they had, right behind where I am, tall barbed wire fences, a huge compound. You can see behind me, I'm kind of pointing, those are the foundations of the houses that people lived in. And then in the very background, you can see that after the camp closed down, the school district bought it. So there are actually schools now on this site. But when it was at the peak and there were thousands of people here, they also had to have schools because, again, some of the people who were jailed here were children. And there were even babies that were born here, so babies that were born in captivity on American soil, which is something that's pretty sad and uncomfortable to think about. But basically, I thought that it was important for me to come out here because even though something might be very uncomfortable to think about or very negative to think about, like, oh wow, how could that happen in the US? I think it's important to see it in person, or to learn about it or read about it, because the truth is, if we don't know what our history is, we are always in danger of repeating it. And this is an instance in which there was a lot of hysteria and suspicion about people who were different, and frankly a lot of racism, and that is what resulted in this. So internment camps, World War II, right here in Texas. And something that I'll tell you, the last fact that I learned that I had no idea was that this camp actually was still opened after the war. So even after we won the war, this camp was still open for a little while. So if you are ever in Crystal City, Texas, stop, read the markers, take a look here. But more importantly, wherever you are, if you live in the US, or actually whatever country you live in, I think that we should really take this as an example of what happens when we get so suspicious of each other and so quick to be afraid of somebody who might be different from us or might have a different origin than we do, that we go so far as we're willing to put them in a registry, make them have identification, which the people in here did, and even jail them. That's an ugly chapter of our history that we should not repeat. All right, this is Miss Checka signing out.